Welcome back to my channel Celebuzz. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. Willie Nelson is 85 years old and still plays music his own way. But recently, he broke one of his oldest rules. In a world where he always chose to stay quiet instead of fighting, he finally said something that shocked even his closest friends. One word, one name, and suddenly, a whole career of staying calm cracked open just enough to let a truth slip out. Who was the singer he quietly called a snake? Was it about money? Pride? Something deeper? What made country music's most peaceful rebel finally speak up? Stay with us because the name behind the silence might not be who you think it is. The man behind the bandana, Willie Nelson, has always been seen as the calm center of country music's crazy world. He's a quiet-spoken rebel who managed to float through scandals, changing music styles and business fights with a smile under his bandana. Unlike many other singers, Willie didn't fight back when people criticized him. Instead, he let time and music do the talking. This peaceful image, often helped by his love of marijuana and slow, thoughtful songs, made him seem like he didn't care about the fights and big egos that filled the country music world. But behind the scenes, people close to him say Willie wasn't blind to the betrayals or mistakes of other singers. He noticed more than he showed, and over time, his silence became its own message. Though he rarely got mad in public, Willie quietly remembered every insult, whether it was on purpose or not. He's the kind of man who doesn't react with fireworks, but who might quietly close a door and never open it again. For many years, that careful approach kept him above the drama, but it also made people think he never had personal or work problems. The truth is more complicated. Willie's love of peace didn't mean he let people disrespect him. It just meant he picked his battles carefully, and when someone crossed a line he didn't speak out. He walked away. That kind of quiet boundary setting was often misunderstood as not caring, but it was actually a very careful act of self-respect. Some people say Willie's silence was his way of protesting. He didn't need to share dirty secrets or attack anyone in the news. He just made sure he never shared a stage, a song, or even a smile with someone who had lost his trust. In interviews, he'd avoid questions about certain singers, change the subject with humor, or tell a story that said everything without saying names. That pattern went on for years, but now, at 85, something's changed. Whether it's his age, thinking about his legacy, or simply having nothing left to lose, Willie seems more open than ever to letting the world see the full picture, including the moments that left scars. So was he ever truly untouched by the drama of the music business? Or did he just get better at hiding it? These are the questions that remain as we look deeper into a man known for peace, but not for being passive. It turns out, even a man who doesn't say much has one word he'll use when the hurt runs deep. The snake in the grass for most of his career, Willie Nelson avoided saying mean things about anyone in public. That's why it was such a shock when, in a rare casual comment to a close friend, he reportedly called one singer a snake. The word wasn't shouted from a stage or printed in a newspaper. It was spoken quietly during a private talk. Yet, for those who know Willie, the weight of that single word was clear. It wasn't said out of anger or meanness. It came from disappointment. Willie doesn't throw around words like that carelessly. When he does speak, it usually means the wound runs deep. What exactly happened between Willie and this mystery singer remains unclear, but the emotional hurt has lasted for years. Those in his circle say it wasn't one big dramatic incident. It was a pattern of small betrayals, broken promises, or possibly an act that broke the trust Willie values above all. Whatever the case, he never confronted the person directly, or made the fight public. He didn't need to. Willie's style has always been to step away without drama but not without meaning, and in this case, that quiet exit may have spoken louder than any confrontation ever could. What's interesting is that Willie has never confirmed who the so-called snake was. Fans and insiders have guessed. Some point to former partners who drifted away, others to rising stars who clashed with his values behind closed doors. But in true Willie fashion, he's let the mystery remain, possibly as a way to avoid creating unnecessary headlines, or perhaps as a final act of kindness for someone who, in his eyes, didn't deserve another chance. The lack of direct accusations doesn't weaken the statement. It makes it stronger. Silence, after all, has always been Willie's sharpest tool. So who was the singer he labeled with that word? Was it a betrayal tied to money, to ego, or to music itself? Those questions remain unanswered. But one thing is clear. For Willie Nelson, to quietly call someone a snake, the damage wasn't surface level. It touched something deeper, something that couldn't be fixed. And that's why this story still lingers, even now. The name and the full weight behind it will be revealed later in this video. The clash with Toby Keith. On the surface, Willie Nelson and Toby Keith may have seemed like natural friends. Both are giants in country music, with strong personalities and loyal fans. But underneath the surface, their values and approaches to both music and public life couldn't have been more different. Willie has always leaned toward bringing people together, using music as a bridge between generations, ideas, and cultures. Toby, especially in the years after 9/11, became known for a brand of patriotism that was loud, proud, and sometimes caused arguments. While Willie respected love of country, he reportedly felt uncomfortable about how Toby used patriotism as a main theme in his music and public image. Their relationship seemed to reach a quiet breaking point after a benefit concert in the early 2000s. Willie agreed to participate, believing the event was about helping veterans and bringing healing across divides. But when Toby took the stage, the mood shifted. According to those backstage, the performance felt more like a political statement than a unifying message. Willie, who stood just off stage, was reportedly caught off guard by the show's aggressive tone. Sources say he later told someone, "That wasn't about the music, that was about the message, and I didn't sign up for that." Not long after, Willie began quietly staying away from any events or appearances that included Toby. What made this split significant wasn't just a difference in beliefs, it was how it challenged the purpose of music itself. For Willie, country music has always been rooted in shared experience and storytelling. It's not a platform to divide people, but to reflect life. Toby's approach, though successful commercially, struck Willie as showmanship wrapped in a flag, something that missed the emotional depth he believes defines true country music. He reportedly called some of Toby's work too loud to hear the truth, a subtle but pointed critique that reflected more than artistic preference. It reflected a clash of intent. While Willie never publicly attacked Toby Keith, he also never worked with him again. When asked years later if he would ever perform with Toby, Willie simply said, "Some things don't need repeating." The silence that followed wasn't about avoiding controversy. It was about protecting what he believed country music should stand for. This wasn't a feud with shouting or headlines. It was a quiet exit, rooted in principle. Willie's rebellion against the machine. In the early 1970s, Willie Nelson found himself at a crossroads. After years of trying to fit into the rigid structure of the Nashville music industry, he realized it simply wasn't working. The system favored polished production, predictable themes, and a cookie-cutter image of what a country artist should be. Willie, with his unusual voice, raw songwriting, and laid-back personality, didn't fit the mold. He wasn't interested in chasing radio hits or following trends. Instead, he wanted to make music on his own terms, real, honest, and unfiltered. That desire pushed him to make a bold decision: leave Nashville behind. Willie's move to Austin, Texas, marked more than a change of scenery. It was a quiet rebellion that would reshape the entire genre. In Austin, he found a scene that welcomed trying new things and independence. There was room for hippies, cowboys, and everyone in between. No one cared how you dressed or who wrote your songs. What mattered was that the music felt real. Willie thrived in this new environment. Surrounded by artists who valued freedom over formula, he helped give birth to what would become known as the outlaw country movement, a loose group of musicians who rejected the Nashville system in favor of something raw and more personal. Of course, his departure didn't go unnoticed. In Nashville, some executives and producers saw it as a betrayal. Willie was labeled difficult, even washed up, by those who didn't understand or didn't want to understand his vision. Radio stations were slow to play his newer material, and certain industry circles quietly wrote him off. But Willie didn't flinch. Instead of fighting for approval, he kept making the music he believed in. Albums like Red-Headed Stranger proved that success outside the system was possible. Willie didn't just walk away from Nashville, he showed others how to survive without it. This chapter in Willie's career wasn't about a single feud or public outburst. It was a quiet, calculated stand against a system that demanded conformity. And by walking away, he didn't just preserve his own voice, he gave countless others permission to do the same. In a business that often demands compromise, Willie Nelson's move to Austin remains one of the clearest examples of integrity over industry pressure. The Ray Price blow-up in 2007, Willie Nelson found himself in one of the rare public fights of his long career, this time with country legend Ray Price. The incident began with what seemed like a harmless joke in a song. Willie, known for his humor and making fun of himself, included a line in one of his tunes that poked fun at Price's age, suggesting the older singer was no spring chicken. While it may have been meant as a light-hearted nod to their decades in the industry, Ray Price didn't take it that way. His reaction was swift and sharp, calling Willie a jackass in a statement that caught fans and industry insiders off guard. The tension was surprising, not only because both men were seasoned veterans, but because they shared a long history of mutual respect. They had performed together, toured side by side, and were often seen as part of the same generation of traditional country icons. But this moment revealed just how thin the line between playful teasing and perceived disrespect can be, especially among artists whose legacies are tied so deeply to their public image. For Ray Price, the joke seemed to undermine his continued relevance and perhaps suggested that age had made him less significant. That sting, whether intended or not, hit a nerve. To his credit, Willie didn't make the situation worse. He didn't defend the lyric publicly or fire back with another jab. Instead, he remained characteristically quiet, allowing the situation to cool down. Over time, the two men made up. They exchanged private messages and eventually reconnected on friendlier terms. Still, the incident remains one of the few times in Willie's career when humor got misread, and it showed how even small missteps can create temporary breaks, even among legends. The public may have moved on quickly, but for those close to the two men, it was a reminder of how delicate old friendships can be under the weight of long careers. In the end, it wasn't a feud that defined either artist, but it was a rare blemish in Willie's record of diplomacy. It also proved that even well-meaning remarks can land the wrong way, especially when legacies, pride, and history are involved. In country music, where storytelling often blends with personal truth, every word carries weight, even the ones meant as a joke. Just when one old wound had started to heal, another relationship quietly began to fall apart behind the scenes. Tension with Kris Kristofferson. Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson have shared one of the most lasting partnerships in country music. As founding members of the Highwaymen, along with Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash, their voices and ideals helped define an entire generation of outlaw country. But behind the friendship and creative chemistry, there were moments of quiet tension, most notably when their artistic paths and personal beliefs began to drift apart. While they never had a public falling out, those close to both men say the friendship cooled over time, shaped by differences in how they saw the role of music, activism, and personal identity. One of the core differences came from politics. Kris Kristofferson has long been one of country music's most outspoken political voices, unafraid to speak bluntly on controversial topics. Willie, while politically engaged in his own way, especially around causes like marijuana reform and family farming, tended to take a more measured diplomatic approach. Their differing styles weren't a problem in the early years, but as the cultural climate shifted and public statements carried more weight, the divide became harder to ignore. Friends of Willie have hinted that he occasionally felt caught in the middle, not wanting to alienate fans or fellow artists by aligning too strongly in one direction. The real shift reportedly happened during a political fundraiser in the late 2000s, where both artists had been invited to perform. Backstage, in a moment meant to be humorous, Kris allegedly referred to Willie as more of a mascot than a musician these days. The remark may have been offhanded, even affectionate in tone, but it struck a nerve. For someone who built his legacy on authenticity and hard-earned respect, being dismissed as a symbol rather than an artist was a subtle insult that lingered. Willie never responded publicly, but insiders noted a noticeable distance between the two in the years that followed. They never officially fell out, and they were never enemies. But the dynamic changed. Fewer joint appearances, no new collaborations. The conversations that once flowed easily became less frequent. It wasn't a dramatic end, but a quiet drift between two legends whose paths no longer aligned the way they once did. And while the bond they built in their prime will always be part of country music history, the tension that emerged later serves as a reminder. Even among friends, words can leave a mark. The shiny side of country Willie Nelson has always stood for a particular kind of country music, raw, honest, and rooted in lived experience. So when country began drifting toward polished pop influences, he didn't join the applause. Willie never directly attacked artists who took country in a more commercial direction, but those close to him say he often voiced quiet frustration about the genre losing its grit. To him, country music was never about image or chart dominance, it was about authenticity. And few artists seem to symbolize that shift toward pop country more than Shania Twain. Shania Twain's rise in the late 90s and early 2000s marked a turning point in country music. With elaborate stage shows, choreographed performances, and crossover radio hits, she brought undeniable star power. But for traditionalists like Willie, it felt like a break from the genre's soul. There's no question Shania had talent, Willie never denied that, but he reportedly felt that the heart of her music was engineered for mass appeal rather than storytelling. In private conversations, he allegedly referred to some performances as Vegas dressed up in boots, a jab that said more about his views on direction than on the person herself. One of the most telling moments came during a high-profile country music awards show. Shania had just been named Entertainer of the Year, a landmark win that signaled the industry's full embrace of a shinier pop-infused sound. Willie was in the audience that night. He clapped, but not with enthusiasm. Later, a backstage moment between them said even more. Shania, smiling and gracious, extended her hand. Willie nodded but didn't stop walking. It wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm either. It was a cold, wordless statement from a man who rarely showed public disapproval. Those who witnessed it understood. Willie wasn't angry. He was disappointed. This wasn't a feud, and there were no public words exchanged afterward. But Willie's silence spoke volumes. He never mentioned Shania in interviews again, and never collaborated with any of the rising pop country stars who followed her path. For Willie, it wasn't about gatekeeping. It was about protecting a tradition he believed was being lost to spectacle. And when country began sounding more like pop with a southern accent, Willie quietly stepped back, choosing instead to remain loyal to the version of the genre he helped build. Broken Brotherhood. Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings were more than collaborators, they were brothers in arms. Together, they helped pioneer the outlaw country movement, rejecting the polished demands of Nashville for a grittier, more honest sound that came straight from the heart. Their partnership was legendary, with joint albums, tours, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. They stood as symbols of rebellion and musical independence. But over time, even the closest bonds can fracture, and theirs did. Quietly, gradually, and without the headlines that usually accompany the downfall of a duo that iconic. The tension didn't come from one explosive moment, but from a series of subtle shifts. Waylon, known for his intensity and perfectionism, reportedly grew frustrated with Willie's increasingly laid-back approach to both life and music. In studio sessions, Willie was known to improvise lyrics, arrive late, or skip rehearsals entirely. Waylon, who took the process seriously, sometimes saw that as a lack of focus. More than once he reportedly snapped at Willie, telling him to get it together, or accusing him of being too stoned to play it straight. Willie, ever calm, never fired back. But those remarks didn't go unnoticed. Over time, their musical paths diverged. Willie leaned into solo projects, activism, and collaborations with artists outside of traditional country circles. Waylon, meanwhile, was still committed to the outlaw ethos, but grew disillusioned with what he saw as Willie's drift toward becoming more of a brand than a bandmate. The final blow, according to some close to the pair, came during a public interview, where Waylon jokingly said Willie was a hippie in cowboy boots who forgot where he came from. It may have been meant as a laugh, but those who knew Willie say the word stuck. After that, the distance between them grew. There was no falling out on paper, no harsh words in the press or canceled tours, but the silence became louder than anything they'd ever recorded. For Willie, who values loyalty as much as legacy, that kind of comment cut deep. And for Waylon, it may have been a moment of frustration that echoed longer than intended. What remains is the story of a friendship that helped change country music, and the quiet fallout that reminded fans that even legends can outgrow each other. Studio Storm. Willie Nelson has collaborated with a wide range of artists over his decades-long career, from country legends to surprising cross-genre voices. But not every pairing has worked. One such attempt, his brief and ultimately disastrous session with Kid Rock, is often whispered about by those who were there, though never formally discussed by Willie himself. It was a one-time studio meeting that many expected to produce a bold, genre-bending track. Instead, it fell apart almost as quickly as it began, marked by tension, miscommunication, and a clash in values that could not be reconciled. According to insiders, the collaboration was loosely arranged through mutual contacts who believed the pairing could create something edgy and unexpected. Kid Rock arrived at the studio full of energy, but not the kind that Willie was known to tolerate. There were reports of loud outbursts, unnecessary showmanship, and what one witness called a total disregard for the tone of the room. Willie, known for his calm and respectful demeanor, reportedly grew increasingly uncomfortable as Kid Rock turned what should have been a creative session into what felt like a performance for attention. It wasn't one specific incident that broke the moment, it was a steady accumulation of behavior. Kid Rock reportedly mocked parts of the instrumentation, demanded multiple takes with no clear direction, and even referred to Willie's band as too slow for this vibe. For someone like Willie, who treats music as a sacred space and collaboration, as a form of trust, the energy in that room was more than incompatible. It was offensive. Without a word of protest or confrontation, Willie quietly unplugged his guitar, thanked the sound engineer, and left. The message was clear. Some collaborations just aren't worth forcing. To this day, neither artist has commented publicly on what went wrong, but the silence itself speaks volumes. No track was ever released, no follow-up session was scheduled, and no plans to revisit the idea were mentioned again. For Willie, walking away wasn't about ego, it was about maintaining a standard. Respect, humility, and the music itself must come first. And when those things are missing, no name, no hype, and no potential chart success is enough to keep him in the room. For those who know Willie, his quiet exit from that session said more than any outburst could. Walking away mid-recording isn't something he's known for, especially not in a business where time, money, and reputation are always on the line. But that day, Willie's departure wasn't about professionalism. It was about values. The creative process to him is sacred, built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared emotional rhythm. Kid Rock's approach, chaotic and ego-driven, disrupted that rhythm entirely. It wasn't just a clash of musical styles, it was a fundamental mismatch in purpose. The aftermath was equally telling. Word of the failed session spread quickly in certain circles, yet Willie never spoke about it. No interviews, no clarifications, no digs. His silence was strategic, not passive. Those close to him say it was his way of keeping the dignity of music intact, even when the collaboration had none. To this day, the session has become something of a cautionary tale among producers and artists, that not all big names belong on the same track. And for Willie, it stands as a rare but powerful example of him drawing a line, not with words, but with the quiet, unmistakable closing of a door. Some names Willie left out of the conversation speak louder than the ones he praised, and one in particular left his circle stunned, a name that shocked his inner circle. After years of silence and subtle hints, those close to Willie Nelson believe they finally identified the artist he once called a snake. While Willie himself has never publicly confirmed the name, the weight of his private comment, shared only in a trusted circle, left fans and insiders speculating for years. Among the possible candidates, one name keeps coming up: Garth Brooks. It's a revelation that caught even seasoned industry veterans off guard. On paper, Garth and Willie have little overt tension, but when you look closer, the pieces start to align in a way that makes the theory hard to ignore. The rift, if true, wasn't caused by one dramatic fallout. Instead, it was a slow accumulation of what some call artistic and personal dissonance. Garth Brooks, known for his record-breaking sales and stadium-filling tours, has long represented the commercial peak of modern country. To Willie, who built his legacy on authenticity and resisting corporate influence, Garth's meteoric rise and his close ties to Nashville's business machinery reportedly felt like a betrayal of the genre's roots. Multiple sources say Willie had extended an invitation for a collaboration in the early 2000s, only to be dismissed with what was described as a courteous brush-off that didn't sit right. It wasn't just the refusal, it was the way it was done. According to a longtime member of Willie's team, Garth's handlers declined the opportunity without much tact, allegedly suggesting Willie was not current enough for the kind of crossover project they envisioned. That comment, whether exaggerated or misquoted, reportedly reached Willie, who didn't confront anyone but took it to heart. For a man who values respect over relevance, it may have been the turning point. Over time, Willie simply stopped mentioning Garth at all, even when directly asked. Those familiar with his patterns say that kind of silence is never accidental. So was Garth Brooks truly the snake, or just an unfortunate symbol of a broader shift in country music that Willie could no longer accept? We may never know for sure, but what's clear is this. For Willie Nelson, music is more than business. It's built on trust, integrity, and shared purpose. Once that trust is broken, even quietly, there's rarely a path back. As one close friend put it, if Willie stops talking about you, it's already over. Some insiders believe the tension between Willie and Garth also reflected a deeper cultural divide, one between country music's soul and its polished commercial evolution. Willie had spent his life championing the misfits, the storytellers, the ones who wrote from the gut instead of marketing meetings. Garth, on the other hand, represented the new guard: high production, mass appeal, and an empire built as much on spectacle as on songs. That contrast wasn't just artistic, it felt personal. For a man like Willie who viewed music as a form of truth-telling, Garth's brand of success may have seemed like a performance that left the heart behind. And yet, in classic Willie fashion, there was no public confrontation, no veiled lyrics or media jabs, just a slow fade. Over the years, when interviewers asked about Garth, Willie would pivot the conversation or offer a vague smile. He never denied the talent, but he never endorsed the man. That restraint, to those who knew him well, spoke volumes. It was Willie's version of drawing a line in the sand without ever raising his voice. The mystery of that one-word judgment, snake, still lingers because it wasn't about drama. It was about disappointment. And for a man who spent decades giving more grace than grief, that disappointment might be the harshest truth he's ever let slip.